Alright, welcome to the very last part of Android development environment setup. We've already went through the entire process of getting everything that we need for development, and we've actually created an emulator in the last video. So now I want to show you how to create a simple Hello World program. What I recommend is if you are using the emulator, whenever you start your homework, whenever you start Android development, since sometimes the emulators do take time to load up, I recommend the very first thing you do once Eclipse loads is to start your emulator. Once you have your emulator running, anytime you run a program, it will automatically use the emulator that's already open and just refresh the application. So there's no need to go and destroy the emulator and restart the actual device. That's not necessary. So boot the emulator up and just leave it going, and things should be okay. So now in Eclipse, I want to show you how to create an Android project. And all you need to do is click File, then New, and once you click on Android Application, it's going to ask you a few questions. I'm just going to give it a simple Hello World for the application name, and come down here to Minimum Required SDK, and since I didn't go back in time and install every single API, the latest I picked was 4, so I'm just going to make that one the minimum required SDK so there's no issues, and then everything else looks like it's in good order, so I'm going to click Next. For this Hello World, I don't need to create a custom launcher icon, no need for that. And as you can see right here, Eclipse has what is known as a workspace, and that's where it's going to save all your projects. And so since I believe the very first time you load up Eclipse, it's going to ask you where you want to place your workspace, and once again I like to put things in the C drive. So when you're in the future looking for your Android project so you can bundle it up and submit it for homework, you're going to want to know where your workspace is. So just FYI, keep a note on where that is. So click Next, and we're just going to click Next again for this one. And once again, we're just going to say Finish. And now Eclipse is going to go and create an Android project for us. And what's really nice about the Android project that it creates for you is that it creates a full functioning Android application that simply says Hello World. So just by creating a project, you have a Hello World Android project. So that's really nice and convenient. So I guess kind of as a quick run through of what this Android project is, I'll explain it to you. There's several different folders. There's starting off with source. That is where all your Java files are going to go. And you can create as many packages as you like. There's one that's created by default. And then here is the only Java file that is used by this program. So as you can see, when you click on it, it's going to load up that file, and this is all our application's doing right here. So it's extremely simple, but you'll find out it'll grow and grow and grow once we get more in depth. Next, we're going to come to this Gen folder, and this folder you don't want to touch. It's automatically generated by Eclipse. What it does is it takes all of your program's resources, which I'll talk about once we get down here, and what it does is it creates a static Java file that your program can reference for accessing resources. So long story short, just don't touch this file, don't go into it, don't modify it, etc. Next are assets. This is where you put things like if you want to read text files, if you want to use external fonts, etc. Next is the bin. This is a folder you won't touch either. When your phone gets, when you are ready to deploy your application or run it, what it'll do is it'll bundle up all the resources and create an APK that can be installed on the phone. So this is where all the output of your application goes. Next is libs. If you have any external libraries, that's where those should go. And then here's this famous res folder. And res does a lot for you. It has what are known as drawables, and this is where you put your images. And so if you notice, there's this image right here. If I click on it, this is going to be the application icon that you're going to see when the phone loads. When you go to applications, you're going to click on that icon, and then it will load your application. Next, you see that there's several more drawables. And if you look at the end, it says -HDPI, -LDPI, MDPI, XHDPI. And what all those mean is that these throttables are targeted for specific densities, screen densities, so different devices. So back in the day, the very first Android device had maybe an LDP or MDPI, and what that means is it had less pixels. Today's phones, like the Galaxy S3 by Samsung, has XHDPI, so that means it has extra high density pixels, so there's much more pixels. And as we go along in the future, this is just going to keep getting greater, so XX, XXX, etc. So what's important to note is that for the device you're developing for, you should figure out what its density is, because if you put an image in the low LDPI and then you try to load this APK on a phone that's XHDPI, what it's going to do is it's going to find whatever image you have and it's going to scale it up for this density. So it might stretch it and make it. That's something important to note. So next we're going to move to the layout file, and we're going to click on this one right here. And this right here, as you can see, is XML. And what this is doing is specifying the layout for our application. You can kind of think of this like HTML, where it's blocking out the structure of our application. And something that's important to note is this file by itself isn't really doing anything. This is just defining the semantics, it's defining the layout for our application. However, we need to, in Java code, tell the application this is the layout we're interested in using and for it to use. So if we go back to our Java file up here, you'll notice right here there's a line called set content view, and what that does is it says, hello Android, I have a layout file that I want to use for my application for displaying. And so if you notice right here it says activity main, that matches the file that I was just looking at. So what this is saying is, when you get created, I want you to load up as the application this layout file. And I'll explain that as we move along in Android, but that's just kind of an FYI. And then here's some other things. Menu, this is where you put resources for your menu key. So when you hit your menu key, you can provide extra options. Probably won't worry about this one too much. And then next you have values folder, and in these values you can put all sorts of crazy things. You can put dimensions, you can put strings, you can define styles, so you want all your buttons to have a certain look and feel to them. And the values folder, once again, also have the ability to adapt to multiple screen sizes. And so rather than using density, that doesn't exactly make sense for values, what they use is SW and then a number. And the SW stands for smallest width, and then 600 dp. And essentially, different values will be read depending on which phone you're on. And I'll explain that once we move on. Moving on, finally, is the Android manifest.xml. And this is kind of the place where you give permission to your application. So here's kind of a heads up view, but I always like to go directly to the XML and look at it. And essentially, the Android manifest is what is read by the Google Play Market. It's what's read by the launcher application when it goes to display your icon. And what it does is it comes in here and it reads what icon it should display. It then says what is the label for this application. And so if you were to go look in your values for /app name, come down here, click on strings, we can see that the name of our application is going to be Hello World. So going back to the manifest, so essentially what the manifest does is it explains, what your application is. It tells what versions of Android you're going to be using. So our minimum SDK supported is 14, so we're only going to allow down to ICS, and we're targeting this for API 17, which is Jelly Bean. Next, you're going to list out activities, which I'll explain in the future, and also you need to list permissions here. So for example, if you want to be able to use the phone's contacts information, you want to be able to read who's in the contacts so you can, pull that into a calendar app. If you want to access the internet, you need internet permissions, etc. So this is the file that kind of manages your permissions and tells the world what you can do. And I'll explain this, of course, in more detail. But after that is just these ProGuard and project.properties. You'll probably never change these two files. So as I mentioned from the get-go, Eclipse creates you just a basic Hello World program. So there's really nothing we need to do for a Hello World except just run it. So all you need to do is right-click on your project and then click Run As and click Android Application. And if you already have an emulator running, hopefully it will automatically load the application for us. And if you look down here in the bottom corner, you can see Eclipse is giving us a progress on what we're doing. So if you wait patiently enough, something will happen. So if you cross our fingers, as you can see, it installed the application right here, and I'm hoping it's going to launch the application for us. Yeah, which it just did. So as you can see, it created a very simple Hello World Android application. So you can be proud that you now know how to make a Hello World Android application. Brag to all your friends and family how easy it was. So this concludes how to create an Android project, how to create a Hello World project, and kind of a brief overview of the Android project files and file hierarchy. So that concludes this entire session on setting up the Android development environment. I hope that was helpful, and we will definitely learn more in class. Thanks.